They thought she was weak because she was quiet. They thought she was stupid because she was kind. But in the high-stakes world of corporate divorce, silence isn't weakness, it's a strategy. When Marcus Thorne dragged his shy wife into court to strip her of every penny he brought his mistress Jessica along to enjoy the show, Jessica laughed at the wife's trembling hands, sneering that she wasn't woman enough to keep a CEO. But neither of them knew the terrifying truth buried in the financial disclosures. Marcus didn't just work for a company. He worked for her company. And the gavel was about to drop on the most brutal reality check of their lives. The fluorescent lights of the Superior Court of Delaware hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to grate against Mira Vance's temples. The air inside courtroom 4B smelled of floor wax and old paper, a sterile scent that did little to mask the stench of a marriage rotting from the inside out. Mira sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple charcoal grey dress, off the rack, unpretentious and intentionally dull. Her hair was pulled back in a severe low bun, and she kept her gaze fixed on the mahogany grain of the table. To the casual observer, she looked defeated, broken. A woman who had been discarded and was now waiting for the final sweep of the broom. Across the aisle, the atmosphere was entirely different. Marcus Thorne, her husband of 6 years, sat sprawled in his chair, radiating the arrogance of a man who believed he had already won. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit, the navy fabric shimmering slightly under the lights. He checked his Rolex Submariner every 30 seconds, tapping his fingers against his briefcase. He was the regional director of Stratton Dynamics, a logistics firm that had seen a meteoric rise in the last 3 years. He was handsome, successful, and utterly convinced of his own invincibility. But it was the woman sitting in the first row of the public gallery who drew the most attention. Jessica Miller. She was 26, 10 years younger than Mira, and she made sure everyone knew it. She wasn't just the mistress, she was the replacement. She wore a bright crimson blazer that violated every unspoken rule of courtroom decorum. Her lips painted a matching shade of aggressive red. She leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand, watching Mira with a look of predatory amusement. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Arthur Pendleton said, his voice gruff as he shuffled through the thick stack of filings. "We are here to determine the preliminary division of assets and discuss the validity of the prenuptial agreement challenge. Your counsel may proceed." Marcus's lawyer, Clifford Sneed, stood up. Sneed was known in the city as a bulldog, a man who charged $800 an hour to eviscerate species. He adjusted his tie and smirked at Mira. "Your Honor." Sneed began, his voice smooth and oily. "My client, Mr. Thorne, has been the sole provider for this household for the entirety of the marriage. He has built his career at Stratton Dynamics through blood, sweat, and tears. He has worked 80-hour weeks while Mrs. Vance, well, frankly, Mrs. Vance, stayed home." Mira didn't flinch. She didn't look up. Sneed continued pacing the floor. "Mrs. Vance claims entitlement to half of Mr. Thorne's stock options and his performance bonuses. We find this laughable. She has contributed nothing to the household finances. She has no career, no public standing, and played no role in my client's corporate ascent. In fact, her social anxiety and refusal to attend industry events were a liability to Mr. Thorne's career." In the gallery, Jessica let out a short, audible scoff. It was loud enough to echo. When a few heads turned, she didn't apologize. She simply whispered to the person next to her. "It's true. She's a mouse. It's embarrassing." "Mr. Sneed," the judge warned, eyeing the gallery. Control your witnesses." "Apologies, Your Honor," Sneed said, barely hiding a smile. "The point stands. We are offering Mrs. Vance the townhome in Jersey and a one-time alimony payment of $50,000. In exchange, she waives all rights to Mr. Thorne's Stratton Dynamics equity and the primary estate in Greenwich." It was an insult. The Greenwich estate alone was worth $4 million. The stock options were worth 10 times that. "And if she refuses," the judge asked, "then we will prove that she violated the moral clause of their marriage by failing to support the marital union," Sneed threatened. "We will prove that her shyness was actually emotional neglect of my client." Finally, there was movement at Mira's table. Sitting beside Mira was not a bulldog lawyer. It was a man named Robert Sterling. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing a suit that looked expensive but dated. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and had spent the last 20 minutes silently reading a document, ignoring Sneed entirely. Sterling looked up, removing his glasses. "Is the plaintiff finished posturing, Your Honor?" Sneed bristled. "I am stating facts." "You are stating delusions, Clifford," Sterling said softly. He didn't stand up. He just leaned back. "We reject the settlement. In fact, we are countersuing for full disclosure of assets. We believe Mr. Thorne has hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands under the shell company Blue River, LLC. Marcus froze. The tapping of his fingers stopped instantly. He shot a look at Sneed. "Objection!" Sneed roared. "This is fishing. There is no proof of such accounts." "We have the routing numbers," Sterling said, sliding a single piece of paper across the table toward the court clerk. "And we are also petitioning to subpoena the travel records of Ms. Jessica Miller to cross-reference them with Mr. Thorne's business trips to Zurich and Milan." Jessica's smirk vanished. She sat up straight, her crimson blazer suddenly looking less like a power suit and more like a target. "This is absurd," Marcus hissed, leaning toward his lawyer. "Fix this." "Your Honor." Sterling continued, his voice gaining a steely edge. "Mr. Thorne claims his wife was a liability. He claims she is shy. He claims she is weak. We intend to prove that Mr. Thorne's success is not only built on sand, but that he has been stealing the sand from his own backyard." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Sterling. I hope you have more than routing numbers." "Oh, we have much more," Sterling said, finally looking at Marcus. "We have the truth." Marcus glared at Mira. For the first time all morning, she lifted her head. Her eyes were dry, clear, and terrifyingly calm. She looked at Marcus, then shifted her gaze past him to Jessica. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at them with the cold detachment of a scientist examining bacteria in a petri dish. "Recess until 100 p.m., Judge Pendleton announced, banging the gavel. As the room cleared, Marcus shot up and buttoned his jacket aggressively. He leaned over the table toward Mira. "You think a cheap lawyer and some fake documents are going to scare me?" "Elle," Marcus whispered venomously. "I'm a director at Stratton. I have power you can't even comprehend. Take the 50 grand and disappear, or I will destroy you." Mira didn't answer. She simply packed her pen into her bag. It was Jessica who made the move. As Mira walked toward the exit, Jessica blocked her path in the center aisle. The mistress stood tall in her heels, looking down at Mira's flat shoes. "You really are pathetic." Jessica sneered, her voice dripping with faux pity. "Marcus told me how you freeze up at parties, how you can't even order dinner for yourself. Look at you, you're shaking." Mira wasn't shaking. But Jessica wanted to believe she was. "He needs a woman, Mira," Jessica continued, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "A real woman. Someone who can stand next to a CEO, not a little girl who hides in the corner. You're doing him a favor by letting him go. Stratton Dynamics needs a face, and let's be honest, honey, yours is too plain for the brochure." Jessica laughed a cruel, tinkling sound. "Go back to your books and your cats. Leave the business world to the adults." Mira paused. She looked at Jessica's red lips, then at the frantic way Marcus was whispering to Sneed in the corner. "Excuse me," Mira said. Her voice was soft, melodic, and incredibly polite. "Oh, did I hurt your feelings?" Jessica mocked. "No," Mira said, stepping around her. "You're standing on my coat." As Mira walked out of the courtroom, Robert Sterling fell into step beside her. "Did she take the bait?" Sterling asked quietly. "Hook, line, and sinker," Mira replied. Her voice was no longer the whisper of a shy housewife. It was the cool, commanded tone of an executive. "They have no idea who signed Marcus's promotion letter last year, do they?" "No, ma'am," Sterling smiled. "They think the CEO of Vance Global, the parent company of Stratton Dynamics, is a recluse named E.J. Vance who lives in Switzerland." Mira adjusted her simple grey dress. "Let them think that for one more hour. I want to hear him lie under oath first." The courthouse cafeteria was a depressing affair of plastic chairs and vending machines, but Marcus Thorne and Jessica Miller were in high spirits. They sat at a corner table, huddled over 2 coffees. "Did you see her lawyer?" Jessica giggled, scrolling through her phone. "He looks like he belongs in a dusty library. Sneed is going to eat him alive." Marcus loosened his tie, taking a sip of black coffee. "Sneed is worried about the Cayman accounts. I told him I covered my tracks, but Mira, she must have been going through my home office." "Does it matter?" Jessica reached out and stroked his hand. "Even if they find a little extra cash, you're the one bringing in the millions. Stratton grew 40% this year because of your supply chain restructuring. The judge sees that. You're the golden goose. She's just the dead weight." Marcus nodded, his ego stroked. "You're right. I made that company what it is. The board loves me. Hell, I'm expecting a tap for the VP role next quarter. Once I drop Mira, I'll have the image to match the title." He looked at Jessica appreciatively. This was what he wanted. Flash, confidence, someone who looked good on his arm at the galas. Mira had always hated the galas. She would stand by the buffet, clutching a glass of water, refusing to schmooze with the investors. Marcus found it infuriating. He needed a partner who could charm, manipulate, and conquer, like Jessica. "What did you say to her in the aisle?" Marcus asked, grinning. "I told her the truth," Jessica smirked, "that she's too shy for the big leagues, that the CEO's wife needs to be a lioness, not a mouse." Marcus laughed. "She probably went to the bathroom to cry." Across town, in a sleek, soundproofed office inside a glass skyscraper, the scene was very different. Mira Vance was not crying in a bathroom. She was standing at a window overlooking the city skyline, a phone pressed to her ear. The office was minimalist and imposing. The name on the frosted glass door read, E.J. Vance, Chairman of the Board. "Yes, Richard," Mira said into the phone. Her voice was crisp. "I need the forensic audit on the logistics division of Stratton Dynamics, finalized by 2:00 p.m. On the other end of the line was Richard Halloway, the chief financial officer of Vance Global. Vance Global was a massive conglomerate that owned shipping lines, tech firms, and pharmaceutical labs. Stratton Dynamics was just one of their many subsidiaries, a mid-sized logistics arm that they had acquired 5 years ago. "We have the data, Mira," Richard said. It's worse than we thought. He wasn't just hiding assets from you. He was cooking the books at Stratton to inflate his bonus structure. He's been routing phantom shipments through a shell company in Nevada. Mira's eyes narrowed. Phantom shipments? Yes, he bills the parent company us for logistics services that never happen. Then he pays the vendor, which is actually his own shell company. He's stolen about $3 million from the company in the last 18 months. Mira let out a long, slow breath. So he's not just a cheater. He's an embezzler. Correct. And Mira, if this comes out in court, the stock price for Stratton will take a hit. Let it take a hit, Mira said coldly. I can rebuild Stratton. I cannot rebuild my dignity if I let him walk away thinking he's smarter than me. Are you sure you want to do this in the divorce court? Richard asked. We could handle this internally. Fire him quietly. No. Mira turned away from the window. She caught her reflection in the glass. She didn't look like the mouse Marcus thought she was. She looked like her father, the man who had built this empire from dirt. He dragged me into public court to humiliate me. He brought his mistress to laugh at me. He wants a show, I'll give him a finale. Understood, Richard said. I'm emailing the files to Robert Sterling now. Mira hung up. She looked at the clock. 12:15 p.m. She walked over to a locked cabinet in her office. Inside hung a garment bag. She unzipped it. Inside was not a grey, shapeless dress. It was a sharp, tailored white power suit, Yves Saint Laurent. It was the kind of suit a woman wore when she was about to acquire a country or destroy a man. She ran her hand over the fabric, then zipped it back up. Not yet, she told herself. Part 3 needs the mouse costume. She had to play the part for just a little longer. She needed Marcus to testify. She needed him to say on the record under penalty of perjury that he was the sole reason for the company's success. She needed him to claim full responsibility for Stratton Dynamics, because once he claimed the success, he also claimed the crime. At 1:00 p.m., the court reconvened. The air was heavier now. The sun had moved, casting long shadows across the defense table. Marcus was back in the witness box. Sneed was pacing in front of him. Mr. Thorne, Sneed asked, playing to the gallery. Can you describe your role at Stratton Dynamics? Marcus sat up straight, adjusting his cuffs. I am the regional director. I oversee all supply chain logistics for the Northeast Corridor. When I took over, the division was failing. I turned it around. I implemented new strategies, cut dead weight, and tripled our revenue. And your wife? Sneed asked. Did she assist in this strategy? Marcus chuckled. Mira doesn't understand business. She finds it overwhelming. She prefers to stay home and garden. She doesn't even know the names of my biggest clients. I tried to explain the corporate structure to her once, and she looked like a deer in headlights. In the gallery, Jessica covered her mouth to hide a laugh. So it is fair to say, Saul, Sneed concluded that the accumulation of wealth during your marriage was entirely due to your intellect and effort. 100%, Marcus said firmly. And you have disclosed all assets related to this success. I have. My life is an open book. Robert Sterling stood up. He didn't look like a sleepy old man anymore. He picked up a thick stack of papers that had just been delivered by courier. The ink was still fresh. Your witness, Sneed said dismissively, sitting down. Sterling walked to the podium. He placed the stack of papers down with a heavy thud. Mr. Thorne, Sterling began, his voice deceptively polite. You work for Stratton Dynamics, Are you aware of who owns Stratton Dynamics? Marcus rolled his eyes. Of course. It's a subsidiary of Vance Global. Correct. A massive international conglomerate. Have you ever met the chairman of Vance Global? No. Marcus scoffed. E.J. Vance is a ghost. Nobody sees him. He runs things from Europe. But my numbers are so good, he leaves me alone. E.J. Vance, Sterling repeated. Interesting initials. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, what is your wife's middle name? Marcus paused. He frowned. He looked at Mira, who was staring at her hands. Jane, Marcus said. Mira Jane Vance. Why? And her maiden name, Vance. We have the same last name. It's a coincidence. A common name. Is it? Sterling smiled. It was a shark's smile. So you believe it is a coincidence that your wife, Mira Jane Vance, shares a name with the reclusive owner of your parent company, E.J. Vance. The room went silent. Marcus blinked. He looked at the judge. He looked at Sneed. Sneed was no longer smiling. He was frantically flipping through a file. What are you getting at? Marcus demanded, his voice rising. My wife is a housewife. She's nobody. Mr. Thorne, Sterling said, picking up the top document. I am going to show you Exhibit C. It is the incorporation deed for Vance Global dated 30 years ago, and Exhibit D, the transfer of ownership deed dated 6 years ago, 2 months before your wedding. Sterling walked the papers over to the witness box. Marcus snatched them. His eyes scanned the legal jargon. His face went pale. Then it went grey. Read the highlighted line, please, Sterling commanded. Marcus's voice shook. Ownership transferred solely to Mira J. Vance. Louder, please, for the record, Sterling said. Mira J. Vance, Marcus whispered. He looked up, horrified. He looked at the mouse at the table. Mira slowly lifted her head. She locked eyes with Marcus. And then, for the first time in years, she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. She's not just a housewife, Mr. Thorne, Sterling boomed, turning to the gallery where Jessica sat with her mouth open. She is the CEO of the parent company that signs your paychecks. She is the chairman of the board. She is your boss. That's impossible, Jessica screamed from the gallery, standing up. She's shy. She can't even order a pizza. Sit down, Ms. Miller. The judge banged his gavel. One more outburst, and you will be held in contempt. It's a lie, Marcus stammered. She never told me this is entrapment. She lied to me. She didn't lie, Sterling corrected. She just never mentioned work at home. Because you never asked. You were too busy explaining business to her. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, do you recall explaining supply chain synergy to the woman who owns the shipping fleet you use? Marcus was hyperventilating. But that's not the worst part, Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave. He picked up the second stack of papers, the forensic audit. Since Mrs. Vance is the owner of the company, any theft from the company is in essence theft from her personal estate. And since you just admitted under oath that you take full responsibility for Stratton's finances, Sterling dropped the audit report on the railing of the witness box. Can you explain why Stratton Dynamics has paid $3.2 million to a consulting firm registered to a Jessica Miller in the last 2 years? Every head in the courtroom turned to Jessica. She froze her crimson blazer, suddenly feeling like a prison uniform. The silence in courtroom 4B was shattered by the sound of Clifford Sneed Marcus's bulldog lawyer slamming his file shut. The confident smirk that had plastered Sneed's face all morning was gone, replaced by the frantic, sweaty sheen of a man realizing his career was about to implode. "Your Honor," Sneed stammered, stepping away from his client as if Marcus were radioactive. I must request a recess. I was not made aware of any criminal implications regarding Stratton Dynamics. I was hired to litigate a divorce, not defend against grand larceny." "Sit down, Mr. Sneed." Judge Pendleton barked his eyes like flint. "Nobody is going anywhere. The bailiff will secure the doors. If there is evidence of felony fraud being presented in my courtroom, we are going to hear it right now." Marcus Thorne sat slumped in the witness box, looking like a man who had been punched in the gut. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white. He looked at Mira, desperate for a sign of the timid, submissive woman he had married. He wanted her to look down. He wanted her to wring her hands. But Mira was looking at him with an expression of absolute boredom. "Mr. Thorne," Robert Sterling continued, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Let's discuss Miller Consulting. You authorized 24 separate payments to this vendor over the last 18 months. What services did Ms. Miller provide to a global logistics firm?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Jessica in the gallery. Jessica stood up, her face a mask of panic. I did consulting, lifestyle consulting for the executives." "Sit down," the bailiff warned, moving toward her. Sterling ignored her and pulled another sheet of paper from the stack. "Interesting, because according to the invoices Marcus signed, Miller Consulting provided heavy freight optimization and maritime fuel auditing. Ms. Miller, do you have a degree in maritime logistics?" Jessica froze. The gallery murmured. "I didn't think so," Sterling said dryly. "Marcus, look at Exhibit G. This is a bank statement for Miller Consulting. It shows that within 24 hours of receiving payment from Stratton Dynamics, 40% of the funds were transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account held by Blue River LLC. Sterling paused for effect, walking closer to the witness box. "And who is the sole signatory of Blue River LLC?" Marcus closed his eyes. "I am." The trap snapped shut. "So," Sterling concluded, pacing before the judge, "you used your mistress's fake company to invoice your wife's company for work that was never done. Then split the stolen money with your mistress. Is that a fair summary of your business genius, Mr. Thorne?" "It wasn't stealing." Marcus shouted, his composure finally shattering. "I earned that money. I brought in millions. I deserved a bigger bonus. The board wouldn't approve it, so I took what was mine." "You took what belonged to the shareholders," Sterling corrected, "and the majority shareholder is the woman you just tried to bully out of her own home." Marcus looked wildly at Sneed. "Do something. Object." Sneed stood up, but instead of objecting, he began packing his briefcase. "Your Honor, in light of my client's admission of guilt under oath regarding federal wire fraud, I must recuse myself. I cannot suborn perjury, and he just confessed to a crime I knew nothing about." "You can't leave me," Marcus screamed. "Watch me," Sneed muttered, snapping his briefcase shut. But the real drama was happening in the gallery. Jessica Miller, realizing the ship was sinking, decided she wasn't going to drown with the captain. "He made me do it," Jessica shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus. "I didn't know it was illegal. He told me it was a tax loop. He said he was the CEO effectively, and that he had permission. He used me." Marcus turned on her, his face twisting in rage. "You lying leech. You begged for that money. You said the condo in Manhattan wasn't enough. You wanted the Porsche. You said, cook the books, Marcus, nobody reads them. You said his wife was stupid. "Ooh, Sasa," Jessica yelled back, tears streaming down her face, though they looked more like tears of fear than remorse. "You said she was a brain-dead housewife who wouldn't notice if the house burned down. How was I supposed to know she was the chairman of the board?" "Enough!" Judge Pendleton roared, banging the gavel so hard the wooden base cracked. "Bailiff, take Ms. Miller into custody for potential conspiracy. Mr. Thorne, you are to remain in the witness box. We are notifying the district attorney's office." 2 officers moved toward Jessica. She kicked and screamed her power suit, now just a costume for a common criminal. "Mira, Mira, help me. I'm a woman just like you. He manipulated us both." Mira didn't even blink. She watched Jessica get dragged out the side door with the dispassionate interest of someone watching a garbage truck collect the weekly refuse. Then she stood up. "Mr. Sterling," Mira said clearly. Her voice carried to the back of the room without a microphone. "I would like to address the court." "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, his tone noticeably more respectful than it had been an hour ago. "You are not under oath, but given the circumstances, please proceed." Mira walked out from behind the defense table. She didn't walk to the witness box. She walked to the center of the room, standing directly between Marcus and the exit. The transformation was complete. The slump in her shoulders was gone. Her chin was high. The shy Mira, who stuttered at dinner parties, had evaporated. In her place stood E.J. Vance, the woman who negotiated trade deals with nations. She looked at Marcus. He was trembling. "You want to know why I was shy, Marcus?" Mira asked softly. The room was deadly silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second to look at Mira. Marcus looked at her, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Elle, please, we can fix this. I'm your husband." "You asked why I was shy," Mira repeated, ignoring his plea. She paced slowly, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. "I wasn't shy, Marcus. I was careful." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, my father founded Vance Global. I grew up in boardrooms. I learned to read balance sheets before I learned to ride a bike. But I also learned something else. Men like Marcus don't want a partner. They want an audience." She turned back to Marcus. "When we met 6 years ago, I was tired. I was tired of men trying to date me for my portfolio. I was tired of suitors who Googled my net worth before they asked for my last name. So when I met you, a mid-level manager with ambition, I decided to run a test. I introduced myself as Mira. Just Mira. A quiet, supportive woman who wanted a simple life." Marcus swallowed hard. I loved you, Mira. In the beginning." "You loved the reflection of yourself in my eyes," Mira corrected sharply. "You loved that I listened to you brag for hours about your strategies. You loved that I never corrected you when you were wrong about market trends. You loved that I made you feel big by making myself look small." She took a step closer to the witness box. Marcus shrank back. "I gave you everything, Marcus. I gave you a home. I paid off your student loans anonymously, of course. You thought it was a federal grant error. It wasn't. It was me. And when you applied for the director job at Stratton, you didn't get that on merit. You were 4th in line. I made the call. I put you there because I wanted to see if you could rise to the occasion." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. You got me the promotion. I gave you the kingdom." Mira said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "And all you had to do was be a decent man. Honest, loyal, kind." She gestured to the empty seat where Jessica had been sitting. But you got bored. The shy wife wasn't enough for your ego. You needed someone flashy, someone who would help. You spend the money you thought you were earning, and when you realized your salary wasn't enough to impress your mistress, you decided to steal from my company. Mira walked back to her table and picked up a document. It wasn't a legal filing. It was a glossy photograph. Do you know what this is, Marcus? She held it up. It was a picture of Marcus and Jessica on a yacht in the Mediterranean. That was taken 3 months ago, Marcus whispered. Yes, on the Vance Global Corporate Yacht, Mira said. You booked it under the company account. You told the captain you were inspecting the maritime assets. The captain is my godfather. He called me 5 minutes after you boarded. He asked me, Mira, why is your husband here with a woman who is drinking champagne out of the bottle? Marcus buried his face in his hands. I have known for 3 months, Mira said. I watched you. I let you dig your hole. I waited for you to file for divorce. I wanted to see if you would have the decency to offer me a fair settlement. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'll feel guilty. Maybe he'll leave me the house and go quietly. She threw the photo onto the floor. But you didn't. You got greedy. You wanted to strip me bare. You wanted to kick the shy mouse into the street so you could move your mistress into my bed. You mocked me. You sneered at me. You underestimated me. Mira turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense rests. We have no further questions for this employee. Employee? Marcus looked up, tears in his eyes. Mira, don't do this. I'll go to jail. Yes, Mira said simply. You will. And while you are there, you will have plenty of time to think about the irony. What irony? Marcus croaked. Mira leaned in her face, inches from the wooden railing. The board voted last week, Marcus. We were looking for a new CEO for the entire North American division. My father wanted an outsider, but I fought for you. I told them Marcus Thorne has potential. I was going to tell you tonight. I was going to reveal everything. I was going to hand you an empire. Marcus's jaw dropped. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a corpse. You were going to make me CEO. I was going to give you the world, Mira said, standing up straight and smoothing her dress. But you were too busy stealing crumbs to notice. She turned her back on him. Mr. Sterling, she said to her lawyer, I believe we are done here. Please ensure the district attorney has the full unredacted audit. Mira! Marcus screamed as the bailiffs moved in to detain him. Mira, please, I love you. It was a mistake. She meant nothing. Mira didn't stop. She didn't look back. She walked toward the double doors of the courtroom. The shy wife had left the building. The CEO had work to do. The morning after the trial, the sun rose over Manhattan, but for Marcus Thorne, the world remained grey. He wasn't waking up in the 800-thread count Egyptian cotton sheets of his Greenwich estate. He was waking up on a thin, plastic-covered mattress in a holding cell at the Manhattan Detention Complex, affectionately known as the Tombs. He had been denied bail due to significant flight risk, a decision heavily influenced by Robert Sterling's submission of Marcus's browser history, which included searches for non-extradition countries like the Maldives and Montenegro. Meanwhile, 50 floors up in the Vance Global headquarters on Wall Street, Mira Vance was fighting a different kind of battle. The elevator doors slid open to the executive floor. Mira stepped out, flanked by security, and Richard Halloway, her CFO. She wasn't wearing the grey dress anymore. She wore a bespoke black suit from Armani, her hair loose and sharp around her face. The office was in chaos. The news of Marcus's arrest and the revelation of Mira's true identity had hit the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg like a meteor. The stock price of Stratton Dynamics had wobbled, dipping 4% in pre-market trading. Mira walked past the rows of cubicles. The whispering stopped instantly. Employees who had once ignored the boss's shy wife when she visited Marcus and now stared at her with a mixture of awe and terror. "Richard," Mira said, not breaking her stride, "I want every single person Marcus hired in the last 12 months audited. If they bought so much as a paperclip without a receipt, I want them gone." "Already started," Richard replied, checking his tablet. "But Mira, the board of directors, is waiting in the conference room. They aren't happy. The stock dip has them spooked. Old man Galloway is calling for a vote of no confidence. He says your marital drama has compromised the company's integrity." Mira stopped. She turned to Richard, her eyes cold. "Galloway said that he did. He's rallying the other members. They think you let this go on too long. They think you were emotional." Mira smiled. It was the same dangerous smile she had worn in the courtroom. "Good. I've been wanting to retire Galloway for years. He just gave me the excuse." She pushed open the double doors of the boardroom. 12 men and 2 women sat around the massive oak table. The air was thick with tension. At the head of the table sat Thomas Galloway, a 70-year-old relic of the old corporate world, who had always viewed Mira as her father's daughter, not a leader in her own right. "Mira," Galloway said without standing up, "we have a crisis. The press is calling this a soap opera. Stratton is bleeding credibility. The board feels that you should step down as chairman temporarily until this mess is resolved. We need a leader who isn't distracted by a cheating husband." Mira didn't sit down. She walked to the head of the table, standing directly behind Galloway's chair. She placed her hands on the back of it. "Distracted," Mira repeated. "Thomas, do you know why the stock only dropped war?" "Because the market hasn't fully reacted yet," Galloway snapped. "No," Mira said. "It dropped was because at 6:00 a.m. this morning, I announced that Vance Global is acquiring Meridian Logistics, our largest competitor in the Pacific. I closed the deal while you were still sleeping, Thomas." The room went silent. Meridian Logistics was a whale. Acquiring them would double their market share. "I used the liquidity from Marcus's seized assets, which I legally recovered this morning, to cover the down payment on the merger." Mira continued, her voice steady. "The market loves a shark, Thomas. By noon, when the merger news cycles over the divorce news, our stock will be up 10%. She walked around the table, making eye contact with every board member. "I didn't let this go on too long because I was emotional. I let it go on until I had enough leverage to clean house. Marcus was the symptom. The disease was a lack of oversight in the subsidiary division's oversight that you, the board, were supposed to provide." She stopped in front of Galloway. "You want a vote of no confidence? Go ahead. But remember, I own 51% of the voting shares. If you call for a vote, the only person leaving this building today is you." Galloway turned red, then pale. He looked at the other board members. None of them would meet his eye. They realized the power dynamic had shifted. The mouse was gone. The lion was eating. "I expect your resignation by the end of the day, Thomas," Mira said softly. "You can cite health reasons. It looks better for your legacy." Mira turned to the rest of the room. "Now let's discuss the rebranding of Stratton Dynamics. I'm thinking of scrubbing the name entirely. Any suggestions?" While Marcus rotted in jail and Myra reconquered her boardroom, Jessica Miller was living a nightmare of a different variety. She had managed to post bail using the last of the money she had hidden in a safe deposit box, that the forensic accountants hadn't found yet. It was 50,000, nearly everything she had left. She walked out of the precinct, expecting cameras ready to spin her story. She had rehearsed it in the cell I was a victim to. Marcus groomed me. I'm just a young girl from Ohio who got swept up by a powerful man. But there were no cameras, no paparazzi. Just a grey, rainy street. She checked her phone. Her Instagram account, which had 50,000 followers and was her main source of validation, was gone. Account suspended for violation of terms of service. What? She shrieked, tapping the screen. No, that's my brand. She tried to log into TikTok. Banned. Twitter. Suspended. Mira hadn't just sued her. She had utilized the scorched earth policy of Vance Global's legal department to issue takedown notices for every platform, citing dissemination of criminal activity and harassment. Jessica had been digitally erased. Desperate, she hailed a cab to her apartment on the Upper East Side. The doorman, a man named Henry, who she usually flirted with to get packages, carried up, blocked the entrance. Ms. Miller, Henry said stiffly, you can't go up. What do you mean I live here? Jessica snapped. Move, Henry. The lease was in Mr. Thorne's name, paid for by Stratton Dynamics Corporate Housing, Henry recited from a clipboard. The lease was terminated at 9:00 a.m. this morning. The locks have been changed. Your personal effects have been placed in storage in Queens. Queens, Jessica gasped. My vintage Chanel bags are in there, my Louboutins. I believe the storage facility is not climate-controlled, Henry added with a hint of satisfaction. You have 48 hours to retrieve them before they are auctioned. Jessica stood on the sidewalk, rain soaking her cheap prison release sweats. She was homeless. She was offline. But she still had one card to play. The gala. Tonight was the Metropolitan Children's Hospital benefit at the Pierre Hotel. It was the event of the season. Jessica knew that Marcus had bought a table for Stratton Dynamics months ago. Her name was on the list as his associate. If she could get in, she could find a reporter. Page 6 would be there. TMZ. If she could just tell her side of the story, sell the interview, she could get enough money to flee to Mexico. She went to a cheap motel, used her last credit card, which miraculously hadn't been declined yet, to buy a dress from a department store off the rack, and spent 3 hours doing her makeup. She had to look like a victim, but a beautiful one. At 8:00 p.m., she arrived at the Pierre. The flashbulbs were blinding. Limousines were dropping off senators, celebrities, and titans of industry. Jessica walked toward the entrance head high. She approached the check-in desk where a severe-looking woman with an iPad was managing the list. Name? The woman asked. Jessica Miller, she said confidently. I'm with the Stratton Dynamics table. The woman scrolled. She stopped. She looked up at Jessica, then signaled to a large man in a black suit standing by the velvet rope. I'm sorry, Miss Miller. That table was rescinded. Rescinded. That's impossible. Marcus paid for it. The table was repurchased, a voice said from behind her. Jessica turned around. Mira Vance stood at the top of the stairs. She looked like royalty. She was wearing a deep emerald gown by Oscar de la Renta that shimmered like dragon scales. Around her neck was the Vance diamond, a family heirloom worth more than the entire building they were standing in. Next to Mira was not a lawyer, but Julian Banks, the handsome 30-something CEO of Meridian Logistics, her new partner. Mira, Jessica breathed. She saw the cameras turning toward them. This was her chance. She threw herself into the role. Mira, she cried out, trying to summon tears. Please, you have to help me. I have nowhere to go. Marcus lied to me too. We're both victims here. The paparazzi went wild. Flash, 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 Mira descended the stairs, slowly stopping 2 steps above Jessica. The height difference made Jessica look like a child. We are not both victims, Jessica. Mira said, her voice calm and perfectly audible to the press. I was a victim of betrayal. You were an accomplice to theft. There is a difference. I'm homeless, Jessica sobbed, reaching out to grab Mira's hand. Security intercepted her arm instantly. You aren't homeless because of me, Mira said, stepping back. You are homeless because you spent 2 years living on money that wasn't yours. You bought purses instead of property. You bought status instead of security. And now the bill has come due. I'll sell my story, Jessica screamed, dropping the act as the security guard began to drag her away. I'll tell everyone you're a cold-hearted witch. I'll tell Vanity Fair. Mira laughed. It was a genuine, amused laugh. Jessica, Mira said, shaking her head. Who do you think owns the publishing house that prints Vanity Fair? Jessica's eyes went wide. I bought a controlling stake in the media group this afternoon, Mira whispered, leaning down. Nobody is going to print your story. You are ghosted. Permanently. Get her out of here. Mira signaled to the guards. As Jessica was dragged kicking and screaming away from the red carpet, looking like a lunatic in a cheap dress, Mira turned to the cameras. She adjusted her diamond necklace, smiled the smile of a woman who had won everything, and took Julian Banks's arm. Shall we go in? Mira asked. After you, Madame Chairman, Julian said respectfully. The heavy doors of the Pierre closed, shutting out the rain, and the screaming mistress leaving Mira in the warmth of the world she ruled. 6 months later, the seasons had changed. The humid heat of the city had turned into a biting, frost-covered winter. But inside the Federal Correctional Institution at Otisville, the temperature was always the same, cold, sterile, and smelling of industrial cleaner. Marcus Thorne sat in the visitors' room. He had aged 10 years in 6 months. His bespoke Italian suits were gone, replaced by a khaki jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight. The arrogance that had defined his face in divorce court was completely erased, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He wasn't waiting for Jessica. Jessica was currently serving 18 months in a minimum security facility in Connecticut, working in the laundry detail. She had tried to write to him once, blaming him for ruining her life. He hadn't written back. He was waiting for his lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Mr. Henderson, who looked overworked and underpaid. Bad news, Marcus, Henderson said, sitting down and not bothering to open his briefcase. Did the appeal go through? Marcus asked, his voice raspy. Did they reduce the sentence? No. Henderson sighed. The judge cited the breach of fiduciary trust and the sheer scale of the embezzlement. The 10-year sentence stands. You'll be eligible for parole in 7. Marcus put his head in his hands. 7 years. He would be 45 when he got out. He would have nothing. No career, no reputation, no money. But there's something else, Henderson said, sliding a single envelope across the metal table. This arrived at my office this morning. It's from Vance Global Legal. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Was it Mira? Was she finally reaching out? Maybe she had forgiven him. Maybe she was going to offer him a lifeline. He tore the envelope open with trembling hands. Inside, there was no letter, no handwritten note. There was only a glossy brochure and a clipping from the Financial Times. The headline read, Vance Global Shatters Earnings Records. CEO Mira Vance, named Businesswoman of the Year. Marcus stared at the photo. Mira looked radiant. She was standing on the deck of the corporate yacht, the same one he had used for his affair, holding a glass of champagne. Next to her was Julian Banks, the former competitor she had acquired. He wasn't just standing next to her. His hand was resting possessively, protectively on the small of her back, and Mira was leaning into him. But it was the brochure that crushed him. It was a prospectus for a new charity foundation launched by Vance Global, the Thorn Initiative, a grant for financial literacy and ethics. He read the fine print, funded entirely by the recovered assets of former director Marcus Thorn. This program is dedicated to teaching underprivileged youth the importance of honesty, integrity, and hard work, ensuring they do not make the mistakes of the past. She had named a charity after him. She was using the money he stole to teach children how not to be like him. She turned me into a lesson. Marcus whispered, tears dropping onto the paper. She erased my legacy and replaced it with a warning label. It's ironic, Henderson muttered, packing up. She's quite the strategist. You know they say the stock price doubled the day after your sentencing. Marcus stared at the photo of Mira one last time. The shy girl who used to be afraid to order dinner. The woman he had mocked for being boring. He realized now that her silence hadn't been emptiness. It had been depth, and he had drowned in it. "Time to go, Thorn," the guard grunted, tapping his baton on the door. Marcus stood up. He left the brochure on the table. He didn't want it. He walked back toward his cell, the heavy metal door clanging shut behind him, with a sound of finality that echoed like a gavel. Outside in the crisp winter air of Manhattan, Mira Vance stepped out of her town car. Julian held an umbrella over her head to shield her from the falling snow. "Did you send it?" Julian asked softly. "I did," Mira replied, adjusting her gloves. "Do you think he'll read it?" "It doesn't matter," Mira said, looking up at the skyscraper that bore her name. "The past is a reference point, Julian, not a residence. I don't live there anymore." She took his arm, and together they walked into the warmth of the lobby, leaving the cold and Marcus far behind in the shadows. And that is the story of how a man tried to break a woman he deemed weak, only to find out she was the one holding the sledgehammer. Marcus and Jessica made the fatal mistake that so many arrogant people make. They confused kindness with stupidity and silence with submission. Mira Vance proved that you don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes the loudest move you can make is signing a document that destroys your enemies without you ever raising your voice. In the end, Marcus got exactly what he wanted, a life where he didn't have to worry about a shy wife holding him back. Unfortunately for him, he'll be living that life in a 6x8 concrete cell, while Mira rules the empire he was too greedy to inherit. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes corporate revenge and ultimate karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Mira's shoes? Would you have sent the letter to prison or just ignored him completely? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about betrayed spouses taking back their power and serving ice-cold justice, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a drama. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. They're usually the ones planning the checkmate. See you in the next video.